Welcome to our first event in the new semester, in the new academic year. And it's an important event which will start tonight and go all day tomorrow. As you probably know, next month, people in Israel and around the world will commemorate the 50th anniversary of the Yom Kippur War. It was Israel's most critical hour since its establishment in 1948. And maybe for a long minute, it looked like Israel might not be able to withstand the surprise attack of the Arab armies back in 1973. In the end, Israel defended itself and was able to strike back. 50 years later, Israel experiences another existential crisis, maybe the most serious one since the Yom Kippur War. This time it's a crisis from within, not from without. And no one knows how the Jewish state will emerge out of this crisis. We all observe a country torn, a country split, not only between right and left, but also between its religious and its secular citizens, between its Jewish and its Arab citizens, between Jews of Ashkenazi and Mizrahi background. These rifts in Israeli society manifest themselves in the political and social clashes that we witness today. They are the topic of our conference today and tomorrow. They are also behind Israel's current struggle to remain a democratic society. There are numerous voices in Israel today, from current president and Supreme Court justices, through prominent security and military leaders and diplomats, to the hundreds of thousands that have gone to the streets every week, who warn us that nothing less than the survival of Israel's democracy is at stake. In such a critical situation, it is also difficult for academic institutions to do what we usually do: invite everyone, the broadest range of speakers, and give a voice to every perspective. When the democratic system is threatened, the freedom of expression and academic freedoms are always at stake as well. In such a situation, academic institutions have to take a stance. We invited a very broad range of internationally recognized experts, and we will certainly witness differences of opinion and judgment. But it's also very clear to us that we have to draw a line, that we will not grant the floor to voices that threaten the principles of democratic values and equal rights. Israel is not alone in its struggle to preserve an open-minded, democratic society. We do not have to look far. We witness the threats to these elementary values in our own country, here in the United States, and we see them in Europe as well. There are similarities and there are differences between these cases, and we'll talk about this. We will focus on the peculiarities of the Israeli case, and especially the various gaps in Israeli society. But also, let us not forget, Israel is a resilient society. Od lo avda tikvatenu. Our hope is not yet lost. These lines of the Hatikva, the Israeli national anthem, are often heard these days. And I don't know any other country whose democracy is in danger, where such a large percentage of its citizens go to the streets, not only once a week, often several times a week, to defend their values. Israelis are used to fight for their survival. Israel is a polarized society, but also a society of bridge builders. And we have invited both scholars and bridge builders. Sometimes there is both in one person. We're grateful that so many of you came all the way from Israel and other places to tell us over the next 2 days about the rifts in Israeli society and about ways to heal the present situation. And I'm honored to welcome all of our speakers tonight, and I'm looking forward to their discussions. I'm also grateful to Alan and Amy Meltzer and to David and June Trone for making this conference possible, and welcome to Alan. Their support has been crucial for the success of the newly named Meltzer-Schwarzberg Center for Israel Studies, which was the first Center for Israel Studies established in the United States 25 years ago when Shimon Peres inaugurated it. I also welcome Lillian Abenson-Klein, and I have to say, we just went to Lillian's art exhibition in the Katzen Museum, and I hope all of you will have a chance to see the wonderful artwork of our amazing supporter at Lillian. Thank you so much. As this is the beginning of our semester, let me also welcome all of you back on campus, and especially I'd like to welcome our first Bama visiting artist and scholar, Efrat Irdai, who teaches a new class on Blackness in Israeli culture and art, as well as our new Meltzer Fellow, former Egyptian diplomat Sayed Ghanam, and our affiliated PhD Fellow, Manaswini Ramkumar. This conference is co-sponsored by the AU School of Public Affairs and the School of International Service, Department of Politics, Governance, and Economy. And as always, I'm grateful to Laura Cutler and the center staff for the enormous efforts that went into organizing this event. It is my pleasure to announce tonight that we have appointed Dr. Guy Ziv of the School of International Service, the new Associate Director of the Center for Israel Studies. Professor Ziv Professor Ziv's new book on the relationship between Israel's security elites and political elites is actually in print. It will be out very soon. Will also be the moderator of our first session. And without much further ado, I declare our conference open and welcome all the speakers to our panel.
Thank you all for being here. This is a full crowd. I'm really excited about this opening panel that I'm moderating here. And we have a wonderful list of speakers. And we're going to start with Mohammad Darawashe. And I want to briefly introduce him. Each panelist is going to give a very short, they've been asked to give a very short talk, so we have more time for Q&A. And Mohammad Darawashe is a leading political analyst and expert in Jewish-Arab relations in Israel. He's played a senior role in major organizations, including Givat Chaviva Center for Shared Society, where he serves as director, and the Abraham Fund initiatives. He's also played several important roles in the Office of Prime Minister, where he's focused, for example, on economic development of the Arab sector. You can see a more complete biography of all our speakers in your program. Without further ado, please give a warm welcome to Mohammad Darawashe.
Okay, thank you very much, Guy. Good evening, everyone. And I would like to start with a very special thanks to my friend Michael, with whom I've been doing some work over years and over continents, also in Germany. The capital of our program tonight is a torn nation. And I think our biggest problem is to try to define which nation we're talking about. Are we talking about the Israeli nation, and there's no such creature? Or are we talking about the Jewish nation? And there is such creature, which is also fragmented. And I think that's the biggest problem that already started with us in 1948. So when we talk about Israel, is it just a state or is it a concept? And I think the lack of definition of Israel as a national identity, that Israeliness is a national identity, as American is a national identity, as French is a national identity. Israeli is not a national identity. Israel is a civic identity. The national identity of the state of Israel is Jewish. And if you have any thoughts, go to the basic law that was passed on the 19th of July 2018. The nation state law says, let's have no misunderstandings. Israel is not the state of the Israelis. Israel is the state of the Jews, which basically takes 21% of the citizens out of the equation of the nationality. So we're not part of the nation of the state of Israel. So the Israeli suit is shrinking to fit 79% of the population. Not really, even less than that, because you have many Israelis who are not Jewish, other than the Arab citizens who are the Russian immigrants, another 3%. So the Jewish population in Israel is barely 74, 75%. So what do you do with the remaining 25%? Citizens of a state that says to them, I'm not your state. Are we stateless? Actually not, because we carry an Israeli identity card. We vote to the national elections. We carry an Israeli passport. And once in a while, we even participate in government, as was the case in the previous government, Lapid-Benite government, where you had an Arab political party as part of the coalition immediately a couple of years after the passing of the nation-state law. So you're talking about some kind of duality where the reality of the state of Israel is Israeli and the constitutional structure of it is becoming more and more Jewish. And that tension between the Jewish and the Israeli identity, some people say that tension is between the Jewish and democratic identity. I beg to differ. I think it's the tension between the Israeli, which is the inclusive identity, versus the Jewish, which is an exclusive identity of the state. Israel doesn't know whether it wants to be an inclusive state or an exclusive state. Now, being a nation state, that's not an Israeli invention, and that's not a Jewish invention. Most nations are in the world, most countries are nation states. And most of them also deal with the issue of minorities. In Europe, you have 23 officially recognized national minorities. To get recognized as a national minority, you need to live in a nation state. That includes Germany, Switzerland, Belgium, Italy, you name it. All those states that are nation states knew how to mutate from only being a nation state into becoming also a state of national minority. Israel doesn't know how to do that with Arab citizens. It sees Arab citizens as individuals, speaks about individual rights, and does not speak about collective rights to Arab citizens. Not true. Okay? That's the language of the law, but de facto, Israel does grant collective rights to Arab citizens without packaging them as such. Mostly inherited collective rights from the Ottoman Empire, such as schools that teach in Arabic language, which was an official language until the nation-state law that was passed in 2018, but even further than that, collective exemption from military service, which started officially in 1992, when Israel decided to recruit the Druze population and exempt the Christian and Muslim population. So Israel knows how to grant collective rights to Arab citizens, but never put them into a package of collective rights to the Arab citizens as a national minority. Again, this is not only a problem of Israel with the Arab citizens, who are 21% of the population. Again, that's also not true, because Arab citizens are only 17% of the population. 3.5% or 4% are East Jerusalemites. who were annexed to Israel in 1967, never granted citizenship. They only have temporary residency status. While they are in Israel, it's permanent residency. The minute they leave, it becomes temporary. The minute their travel document expires, and usually it lasts for 2 years, they lose the right to go home. And it doesn't matter if you are from the Husseini family that has been living there since 1400 years ago, or other families that have lived for even much longer than that. You lose your right for residency in that area. So the tension between the Israeli inclusive and the Jewish exclusive nature of the state seems to be, in my view, the mother of all problems in Israel. Israel doesn't know how to be an inclusive state. It still doesn't understand that this is the way it actually is. The reality is that Israel treats me one day as a citizen, another day as a stranger. That's the feeling. It's a feeling that of duality that has not come to a closure. Now, I would like to, just for the sake of didactic approach, to divide this, the political identity of Israel, the debate about whose state is it. Uzi Benjamin, one of the Israeli journalists, wrote a book in 2003, and the title of the book was "Whose Land Is It?" So I beg to choose and change it a little bit. Whose state is it? The state of the Jews or the state of the Israelis? That's a debate, in my view, going backwards instead of going forward. While on the horizontal approach, that's the political is the vertical, and the horizontal approach, which is the social economic, Israel is beginning to behave more and more as the state of the Israelis and not that much as the state of the Jews. So one tension, the vertical discourse, is dragging Israel to become more and more Jewish at the expense of the Israeli nature, more and more Jewish and nationalist at the expense of democratic values, while the social economic arena is progressing actually in the Israeli nature, more inclusive approach. If you don't believe me, listen to a few examples. In 2003, the percentage of Arab students in Israeli universities was approximately 3.5% to 4%. Today, it's almost 20%. The academic scene is changing in Israel. 20% of the student population are Arab citizens. Let's look at the percentage of Arab workers in civil service, people working for the central government. In 2003, it was about 1.7%. Today, it's 13%. Let's look at the police service. In 2003, it was 1%. Today, it's almost 12.2%. So there are things that are moving very fast. Doctors. The percentage of Arab doctors in Israeli hospitals is about 24% today. Nurses, 44%. Dentists, 36%. And pharmacists, 55%. So Israeli society knows how to open the doors, mostly based on need, not that much based on ideology. So when there's a need for doctors, they open the doors. Now there's a need for more Arab citizens to engage in the academic scene, because it's better to have an academic citizen that produces almost 2 or 3 times the average wage, and that contributes to the GDP of society. It increases the economic the benefit for all citizens of Israel, and that's why the state is developing more opportunities or allowing more opportunities on the social economic arenas, but going backwards on the political scene. The other point that I want to mention is, when we speak about the nation torn, is occupation. The issue of the status of the West Bank and Gaza, which was determined in the 90s that its future is going to be as semi-independent state or maybe a fully independent state or state in the making as a result of the Oslo agreements, that process was derailed, and it's tearing Israeli society apart, because the fact that it is now going, if it's not derailed, if the fact that it's been derailed, it means the annexation process is the alternative. Keeping it under Israeli control with some level of Israeli engagement, and that level of some Israeli engagement basically means that the Palestinian Authority will be just simply a subcontractor for the State of Israel at the expense of the Palestinian people, which will never have independence and will never have freedom, will never have a capacity to live on equal status as the Israelis, but still be under Israeli control. Many choose to look the other way about the other side when we talk about occupation, but I don't think any nation can survive as long as it exercises occupation against another nation living so closely and proximate. It's not like the UK was in the Falkland Islands and that you couldn't feel it. Here it's only 5 minutes away. And the Palestinians are going to always continue to fight for their own independence and freedom, a value that many Israelis share for themselves, not sure that they share it when it relates to the Palestinians. The third point I want to mention is the religious Haredi population, which is growing very, very significantly and developing values of dependency on the rest of Israeli society, mostly economic dependency. And when we used to talk about the smaller number of Haredi population, their dependency on the rest of Israelis was minor. It wasn't that significant. It didn't have that much impact on the economy of the state, but also on the public sphere. They were not that felt. They kept to themselves. And now they're spreading almost in every city that develops their own neighborhood, such as including new cities. If you go to Modi'in, if you go to Harish, towns that were newly created, they're beginning to also ask for their segment or their share as a separate entity. So they approach the whole Israeli society from the perspective that we don't want to mix, we don't want to integrate. Their approach is that they want to maintain their lifestyle as very separate, but also, as I said, expecting to be dependent on the rest of Israeli society, which, with the volume of it, today they're about 15-16% of the population, it's becoming a volume that Israeli society cannot carry for long. The fourth is the national religious group, which actually ties to the second about occupation, because their approach is that Israel is not the 1967 borders. Israel is the Jordan River borders. And in order to maintain Israeli superiority, it means that they can never grant Palestinians equal rights. And unfortunately, their perspective is not just nationalist, it's nationalist and religious. So they count on 3,000-year-old stories to justify superiority. And when they talk about annexation of the West Bank, specifically the West Bank, they have no idea of granting the Palestinians the status of citizens, and even if they get the status of citizens, maybe even confiscate some of their rights. Now let's connect all of this to the current reality in Israel, with all of the demonstrations against the judicial coup. Some call it reform. I prefer calling it the judicial coup. Within the Arab community in Israel, we're convinced that one of the main goals of this judicial coup is to reach the next elections with limitations on the Supreme Court in its capacity to change decisions of the Central Elections Committee. The Central Elections Committee, almost every year, every elections, prevents one or two or three Arab political parties from running. It's a political committee. Usually the makeup of the Central Committee is the Knesset format that is leaving. So the 64 members of the Knesset today will actually have the majority in the next elections committee. And clearly the committee will prevent one or two of the Arab political parties from running, and as a result, it will result with no Arab citizens voting. And that's the goal. If the Supreme Court cannot overrule the committee, which usually the Arab parties that get cancelled or prevented from running, they appeal to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court reinstates them in the race. By the way, this usually even contributes to their publicity, and they become more popular because they get prevented from running. But this time, there will be no Supreme Court. There will be no capacity for the Supreme Court to reinstate such political parties into the race. And Arab citizens who are reducing their rate of participation in the elections over the last years, just to give you an indication, 1999, the turnout rate in elections of the Arab citizens was 78%. In the Jewish community, it was about 79, 80%, very similar. In the last elections in the Jewish community, it was about 73%. In the Arab community, it was 53%. So there's a walk out of the Arab voters from the political system for many reasons. One, dissatisfaction from Arab political parties. They feel that those Arab political parties are not delivering what they promised to deliver. Second, knee-jerk reaction to the nation-state law, which basically is translated into Arabic, they don't want us, so we will walk out. It's not a fair political scene. They speak about equality and institutionalize this two-layer society, so we will punish that system by walking out and not even voting at all. And the third is also failure of the Israeli Jewish, let's call them liberal camp Jewish parties, in offering an alternative. In the past, they used to compete for Arab votes by offering two things. One, an agenda that deals with the issues that are relevant to the Arab citizens, but also candidates from the Arab community. And the last, what we've seen, are pretty much lousy candidates and pretty much no agenda towards the Arab community. And that ended up with complete pullout of the Arab voters from voting to such political parties. The last word I would say, actually I will, because of lack of time, the word conspicuous absence. It's a title of an article I wrote a couple of months ago, the conspicuous absence of Arab citizens from the demonstrations. Why are we not part of demonstrations that we feel are supposed to be to our interest? One, it's the patriotic nature of the demonstrations, carrying Israeli flags led by ex-military commanders, speaking about the old Israel that they want to protect, which has been unjust to Arab citizens. Arab citizens do not want to protect the old Israel. We don't want to see the new Israel that Netanyahu and the right wing is trying to create. But we want to see Israel going into a more liberal approach, a more inclusive approach to its Arab citizens. On this topic, I can speak another whole conference, but guys' body language is very obvious. Thank you very much.
We'll have thank you. We will have a chance to engage with your thought-provoking comments in a few minutes, but first we want to hear from Dr. Tzvi Ben-Dor Benite, who is a professor of Chinese history and Middle Eastern and Islamic studies at New York University. He's the author of numerous articles and several books, including Tao of Mohammad, A Cultural History of Muslims in Late Imperial China, published by Harvard University Press, and The 10 Lost Tribes, A World History, published by Oxford University Press.
Thank you. I'd like to thank American University for inviting me again, Professor Michael Brenner and Ms. Laura Cutler for organizing this. I've been here 6 months ago for a conference that discussed the Mizrahi population or Middle Eastern Jewish population in Israel. But today I'd like to actually start my words with discussing actually 4 Jewish lawyers from Europe. Let me begin very, very quickly with some sort of establishing a point of view where we are, where we started. So let me mention someone by the name of Hersch Lauterpacht, born in 1897, died in 1960, in Galicia, was a Jewish lawyer, a legal theorist, a justice later on at the International Court Tribunal at Hague. Yes, the place that everybody is afraid that Israel will end now. He was an international law specialist, And he began already in the 30s to think about the limitations to state sovereignty from the point of view of international law, in terms of he was very much concerned with crimes against humanity. And it's clear that, his Jewish experiences in Galicia guided, his thinking about that. He had a very, very serious career as a human rights legal scholar and advocate in England later on. The second one, very quickly, is Raphael Lemkin, probably the best known, born in Galicia also, in 1890 and passed away in 1959. He's known because he coined the term genocide in 1943. Both were very much involved in the Nuremberg laws, trying Nazi criminals. The third person is René Cassin, or Cassin, depending on how you do this. There's a high school in Jerusalem after his name, so I say René Cassin the way we used to do this. Born in 1887, 1976. He was responsible for the Universal Declarations of Human Rights that was adopted by the United Nations. He was part of the founders of the Human Rights Commission, and he was also a justice at Hague. Eugene Kalischer. Don't worry, it's not a history class. I'm a historian, but it's not a history class. Eugene Kalischer, born in Kiev, 1881, passed away in the United States in 1956, started as a Jewish lawyer, ended up as a sociologist, demographer, and statistician, was very much involved in understanding the conditions of refugees after World War II, coined the term displaced persons. Yes, and was very much involved in establishing the fact of like refugee rights, refugee categories, etc., etc., etc. He also said, most scholars are rooted in their environment. They differ in their ability to outgrow it. Okay, so I'll try to outgrow what I'm my own environment. The reason why I mention all of this is because these four Jewish lawyers, were very much instrumental in developing the international legal regime in the West, at least, that is now right now is under attack in Israel. All four aspects that these people did, these four people did, coming out of a very specific, particular Jewish experience and then moving to the universal. To thinking in universal terms, thinking not just the crimes against Jews, but take that and think about crimes against humanity, etc., etc., etc. All of these things, that was a very interesting moment, that was that created the international regime that is right now, under attack in Israel. Okay, and not only that, there is a direct connection. Hersch Lauterpacht, whom I mentioned first, was invited by the Yishuv in May of 1948, or just before May 1948, to write the Declaration of Independence, the one that everybody is mentioning today as like the one that needs defense. He wrote 2 drafts. Some of it went into the Declaration of Independence, and the rest of the articles, that discuss human rights and civic rights and equality among Israeli citizens, regardless of who they are, yes, was in the spirit of the decision 181 of the United Nations in 1947. Okay, so Israel is intimately connected to that moment that these 4 Jewish lawyers represented, and I'm using it now to give a point of view to see how far we went from that moment. Of course, it would be naive to think that, Israel lived that moment even in 1948. It began betraying it immediately. First, it betrayed the Palestinians. Then it betrayed its own Arab citizens after it was created in 1948. It continued to betray, the various Jews from the Jewish populations that came to the state, to the newly created state in 1948, For example, there were mechanisms that were established to discriminate against Middle Eastern Jews who came. Under 1 million Middle Eastern Jews came between 1948 and 1967 to Israel from countries in the Middle East, mostly because they were fleeing persecution, which is most Jews have been doing since modernity, fleeing persecution. Okay, and seeking refuge in places that have these legal regimes, that these 4 Jewish lawyers helped to develop. Okay, now it's really, really remarkable to think about that starting point and what we have and where we are today, because this is precisely what is under attack today in Israel. The Supreme Court in Israel is being attacked precisely because it, not always, in fact, or very rarely, to some people's view, actually try to represent those 4 areas that I mentioned. Migration rights, rights of refugees, rights of people of weakened populations, rights of women, rights of categories that at the time didn't really exist, as legal categories, but since then came on the scene, came on our radar, and so on. All of this is sometimes protected by the Israeli Supreme Court, and that is why it's under attack. Okay, has nothing to do, to my mind, with the fact that there are tribes in Israel. There's a discourse that there are tribes in Israel and the Israeli society is torn. Okay, there are Mizrahim and there are Ashkenazim, there are Haredim, there are Palestinians, and so on. That is true. And there are plenty of social scientists who make have a lot to say about that. But the current moment right now in Israel, I don't think it's a tribal war. I think it's basically an attack on the spirit that I try to portray very, very quickly, that was created in the 40s and the 50s by people like these 4 Jewish men as a direct result of Jewish experience in the 100 or 100 years before, 150 years before that moment, before the creation of the state of Israel. Okay, what these men represented, and many other people represented at the time, they represented something very, very simple. The idea of solidarity. Okay, solidarity, the idea that you outgrow, the way Calderon did it, outgrow your own environment and think about others. Okay, take your own experience and think about others. This was a solidarity. I think this was a promise of the state of Israel at the time. Solidarity, with the rest of the world, at least maybe with the rest of the West. This is how Israel was perceived. Let us not forget, at least before 1967. Yes, even though the realities were much different. And of course, Jewish solidarity inside Israel. All of this was betrayed. Civic solidarity, as we just heard, actually never really existed. Israeli Palestinians, Israeli Arabs, were under martial law pretty much from 49 until 1966, and then the rest of the Palestinians were placed under occupation, which is until today. Okay. Now, the panel also discusses, the social gaps and how to bridge them. So, what I would like to end my talk with, my brief words with, is actually to say, well, what we really need is not further recognition that there are tribes in Israel. Okay? What we really need to recognize is that, solidarity in Israel is dead. And we need to do everything to revive it. The sense of solidarity, the idea that, we can be together with our Palestinian brethren, with our Haredi brethren, that Mizrahim and Ashkenazim, can live together, okay? It is quite nonsense to think that the divide right now between the Sephardic Jews or Mizrahi Jews in Israel and Ashkenazic Jews is what feeding that. This is what the government wants us to think. But the reality is very, very different. If you went to the demonstration in support of the government, it was 2 days ago or 3 days ago, it seemed maybe between 2,000 and 10,000 people, most of them actually representing less than 4% of the Israeli population, which is certain sectors within the settlement community. Okay, the most radical ones, not even the entire settler community. Okay, you don't see any Mizrahi presence there. You don't even see serious Haredi presence in those demonstrations. They are quite minimal compared to the huge numbers of the people who have been continuously and heroically supporting, protesting against the judicial coup, since January 4th or since January 5th. They represent a sense of solidarity, and they have plenty of work to do, to show solidarity with the Israeli Arabs, to show solidarity with other populations. Okay, that is the thing that is lost. That is the thing. Not the existence of tribes is what tearing Israel today, because Israel always had tribes. Yes, there were divisions in the Yishuv. Yes, there was a rift between Sephardim and Ashkenazim 50 years before Israel was created. I mean, come on, we're Jews. We like to be separate, we like to be divided. In the Middle Ages, Jews were divided, okay? So it wasn't that. What was the sense? What kept the people together is actually the idea of solidarity, or an image of solidarity. The idea that you sell a book of Torah in order to ransom a Jewish captive in the Middle Ages. You know, a lot of pirates did a lot of money out of that. Okay, that was representing something, even though, you know, there were differences and there were tribes and there were different communities that more often than not were at odds with each other. There were differences between Sephardim and Ashkenazim in Amsterdam in the 17th century, in New York in the 19th century, in Los Angeles today, and in Israel and so on. But still, you know, the nation was together because there was some sense of solidarity that, you know, has been destroyed completely, probably in the past 30 years. One of the things that you hear a lot is actually not about the divide. One of the things you hear, and I think it's authentic, is actually a discourse of revenge. Those who are now pushing for these judicial reforms, you know, are talking about revenge. Revenge for the disengagement from Gaza, revenge for Oslo, different types of revenge. Yes. But these are not tribes. These are emotions, you know, that very, very small segments of the population are pushing them. In 2017, there was the mention the law of the when the law of the nation was 18. Sorry, the law of the nation was enacted. One of the aspects of it was actually the downgrading of the Arabic language is an official language of Israel. That's, by the way, a decision. The decision that the official status of Arabic as an official language in Israel is actually part of Decision 181 that created Israel and forms the international legal basis for its existence today. It was something that was mandated by the Security Council. Okay, that was a retreat from that. Okay. The downgrading of the language met with some opposition. 6 or 7 Palestinian-Israeli organizations appealed to the Supreme Court, and 1 Jewish organization, I'm very proud to have been part of that initiative, of Mizrahi Jews, Jews from Arab lands. We were all obviously born in Israel, but we represent the second generation. And we made the argument that, you know, Arabic is the language of our parents. My parents came to Israel from Iraq. I grew up speaking Arabic pretty much until I was 6 years old before I went to school, and Hebrew became my dominant language. And what we represented there, by the way, the Supreme Court threw us out immediately. The Supreme Court listened somewhat to the Arab organizations and refused to listen to our Jewish speakers at all. I mean, it didn't even register to them the idea that the Arabic language and Jews is connected, even though, you know, it is very much a Jewish language, Arabic. Many of the most important philosophical writings, you know, in the Middle Ages were written in Judeo-Arabic, or basically in Arabic. Okay. What we try to do there is actually to revive the idea of solidarity. Not to play a tribe, not to play, you know, second Israel against first Israel. In fact, it was first Israel that threw us out there, and which makes us supposed to be, but we were together with other people who was also excluded. The idea was basically to come back with a notion that we can work together, not despite our differences, but because of our differences. And, you know, because you are different and you choose to work together, that's where you have solidarity. So I'll stop here. I think you mentioned it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And finally, we have Dr. Ruth Calderon, who's sitting right next to me. She's an educator and a scholar of the Talmud. Ruth founded Beit Midrash Elul, which serves Jerusalem's diverse Jewish communities, as well as Alma Home for Hebrew Culture in Tel Aviv. She's the author of A Bride for One Night, Talmud Tales, and a Talmudic Alphabeta. In addition to her academic work, Ruth also has political experience, having served as a Knesset member for the Yesh Atid Party from 2013 to 2015, and as the Deputy Speaker of the Knesset. Please welcome Dr. Ruth Calderon.
Thank you. Thank you all. I want to also thank Michael Brenner and Laura Cutler for inviting me and for making all this happen. And I want to greet the new students and the students that go on, start the year, and tell you from all of us that these are the best times of your life, and that make good friends and open your thoughts to new thinking, and that we all envy you. And I hope you'll find us interesting. After my two fellow colleagues here, I want to say I'm a Zionist. I'm a Zionist Jew. I believe that the Jews deserve a nation state and a homeland. I guess it is connected to the fact that both my parents flew from Bulgaria, Turkey, and from Germany, and they raised us telling us that it's something that we should appreciate and cherish, the fact that we have a homeland and my father used to be beaten after school, and that is not the case, and we feel at home as a majority in Israel. Having said that, we are living in a time of a cultural war, Kulturkampf, in my mother's German. And it is a very serious crisis that we're going through. I've been in the demonstrations in the streets now for 9 months. Could have another grandchild. We both have new grandchildren. It started with the umbrellas and it got to extreme heat. But there was no question every Saturday night, and as you said, sometimes during the week also, there was no question that everybody comes out and that there is a flag in the car and in the home and wherever. And you are right that there was a reclaiming of the Israeli flag that the center and left did not celebrate for many, many years. I'm being sharing here. My father was center right, so we were very close to the flag, but it wasn't something that was done or accepted. And today it was reclaimed, saying not only the right owns the flag, it belongs to all of us, it belongs to democracy, it belongs to equality, to feminism, and so that was the first thing. And then something very new to me, I didn't feel that in my lifetime, going out and being with thousands of people in the streets that nobody paid and nobody told to come, and it is very well organized, but you come because you want to come and you want to be part of it, and there's a great feeling that you are fighting for something good, for solidarity, for democracy, for the Supreme Court. There was in some ways a feeling that my parents told us that they felt in 48. A celebration. It was frightening. We woke up. The Mohammad such a great room to not know your English. I can ask any question. The middle class woke up. It's like a bear that stood up suddenly. People that you never saw outside. Everybody was minding their own business and raising kids and doing, from going into high tech and making a good life. And suddenly everybody left everything outside and walked into the streets. And for me, as a secular Jew, it was a kind of a synagogue where you come every Shabbat. There's no question that you go. You meet everyone. They say the same things in different words. And you feel uplifted and you go home renewed and hopeful. Now, I know I'm talking from the inside, so I'm not sure that I know exactly, you're like a little ant walking in the line and you don't know what it looks like from the outside. And I'm sure that people on the right feel the same uplifting when they go to their demonstrations. But that was a very big wake up for me I'm working in Jewish education and Jewish culture for many years, and I never felt people so awake. The first thing was the reclaiming of the flag. In the beginning, there were many Arab participants in the demonstrations, and then they decided, as you explained quite well, why they did not feel they are part of this, or we're fighting for them. And I'm sorry about that, but I'll talk about it in a minute. because occupation came back as a word and as a major issue, and that and peace was in many ways not talked about, and came back to the sea. But so the first big, I want to finish our panel with a little bit of optimism. So I want to tell you that some very good things I think are happening while we are in crisis and in great danger, that I don't know how it will end. But the first thing was the reclaiming of nationality, not in nationality as opposing anyone else or dominating other people, or I hated and tried to fight the national law. I was trying to push for writing the Declaration of Independence as a basic law, and I tried to do it when I was serving in the Knesset, and I didn't have a majority, and they did, and they passed this law that I think did a lot of damage to our relationship with the Druze community, with the Arab community, with the Bedouin community. But that coming back to saying democracy, equality can also be our nationality, or part of our nationality, was very important to us. Because I think, as you mentioned, those four people, you could be a Zionist and a Democrat. There's no need. This Jewish supremacy I feel is an illness of Zionism, not the natural attribute of it. The second thing was the Declaration of Independence. That, as I was saying, while I was serving in the Knesset, I couldn't get a majority, including people I don't want to name, that are today fighting in the center. And they said, no, it says complete equality to all citizens with no difference of so forth. And they said it's too dangerous, and they wouldn't do it. And the third thing that I hope is happening now is that the majority, still maybe a small majority of the Jewish secular people, are reclaiming their Jewishness and understanding that what is being taken away today, the ability to live a free life as a secular Jew, as a non-halachic or non-rabbinic or non-synagogue goer necessarily. Maybe when we'll have another day of rest, more people will go on Shabbat to synagogue, but at the moment, that's not the way we celebrate our Jewishness. But we are Jews, and I am part of the movement of reclaiming classic texts and studying and saying that we, as non-halachic Jews, are complete, good, full, legitimate Jews, and that we have a right, like anyone else, ultra-Orthodox or religious, to decide how we live our Jewish life and in what way and so forth. These are the days of Slichot. Last night in the synagogues we started saying Slichot because I'm visiting in New York. I went to synagogue. It's interesting why in Israel I don't, but in America I do. But I went to BJ in New York, and I was moved from the thought, the amazing, beautiful Jewish thought, that first of all, that we mess up. We have good intentions and they don't work the way we planned. And that there's a way, a very deep, beautiful Jewish concept, that you can fix, that you can letaken, you can mend, you can do tshuva, and you can change. And something that is maybe more Zen Buddhist, but also Jewish, says that if you decide, you see what you did wrong, and you recognize, and you say, this was wrong, and you want to change, the you that wants to change is not anymore the person that did the wrong. You are changing all the time. All our body and all our mind is changing all the time. And Judaism says Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, is an opportunity to start anew. And I want to say 3 sins that I feel, and I'm talking not only me personally, but as a part of the Jewish state, 3 sins that we committed and that I believe we can change, we can correct, we can mend. The first sin in the Jewish identity world is that when we built Israel, I'm talking my grandparents' generation, they threw the baby with the tap water. They threw out any religious belief or spirituality. It was completely not accepted to be religious or spiritual. And I just visited Turkey, where my grandfather was and my grandmother was living. In Turkey, Ataturk did something similar and cut the religious Turkish culture in one day and threw away the whole thing and made a new Turkey. And if you visit Istanbul, or I was in Edirne recently, you see a lot of religion coming back, because it was not a process. It was a very artificial and because even dramatic, even akhzari, even cruel way of cutting not just the heads of religious and spiritual leaders, but in the people themselves. I was also in Bulgaria now, and I saw, after years of communism, people coming back to the churches. There is, I think, I'm talking for myself, I think there is a spiritual talent or sense in the human being, not for everyone. I have a daughter that doesn't have it, but I do, and some people do. And to not allow people to be spiritual, to come to synagogue, this very moderate, especially in the Sephardi world, but also in my Galicianer family that ended up in Germany, they were religious, but in a very moderate kind of way, in a very happy kind of way, in a very, and I guess they had good reasons why they cut themselves off. There were many times religion becomes very severe and cruel to its communities, but I think that is the first sin. And because we don't have the normal moderate religiosity, we get the extreme messianic people that I can't, I'm trying to think that everyone is doing their best, and that I'm Talmudic, so I'm trying to see that the other side also has a reason. I don't get the people that want to build a temple on Temple Mount and sacrifice red cows that they actually bought. I'm afraid of it. I think it's a great danger. But I think there's no vacuum. And when you don't let people feel natural religiosity, something else will take the place. And I think that is the first sin that we can correct. And I think it is being corrected. I think there's a movement that it's much more legitimate today for people to have all kinds of religious expressions. The second big sin is the oppression or the hurt that the state, again, I don't think anyone meant to do it, but they did to the Sephardi and Eastern Jews. As a Sephardic father, I know that it was not equal to find his place in the university and get his tenure and professorship was a very long journey, because his name was Calderon. And it's something that was not talked, but whatever is not talked behaves. And I think what you said today, that there's revenge and there's anger and there's frustration because it happened and because there's no recognition of it. I think what needs to be done, you can't fix what happened 40 or 75 years ago, but you can say, yes, it's true. There are babies that were lost, Yemenite babies that were gone. There are people that did not have the same opportunities in education. I have two brothers. One looks very Ashkenazi, one looks very Sephardi. They're both physicians. They already retired from hospitals. But my Sephardic brother was muslal, was tracked to something to work with his hands, as my Ashkenazi brother was tracked to academics. And, he got to be the head of the university where the other one was the head of the department, and there's justice in the world. I think that is not, I hate the tribe language. I think it was a mistake by our president to talk about tribes. But I think when someone gets hurt and is in pain in your life, if you leave something not repaired, it will come back to you. And it comes back to us as a society, as a country. It's not in their demonstrations, but it is in the voting. People vote like they cheer football clubs. and people that don't feel that this club accepts them will not, I think, I'm not sure, not a big politician, I was only 2.5 years there. The third big sin is our terrible failing of understanding to what a beautiful and deep and profound culture we came when we came to the land of Israel. Islam and Arabic and the life in the land of Israel is, I have goose when I talk about it, is so deep and suitable to the place and has so much to teach us. And I think, again, the people that came, refugees that came to Israel, and they were most of them very European oriented, they completely missed it. They did not learn Arabic. I'm trying to learn Arabic for a few years now. When the culture doesn't support it, it's very difficult to learn. But when you learn the language, it's like so tasty in your mouth because you understand Hebrew words when you learn Arabic words, and you understand concepts when you understand the culture and the religion. And when I went now in Turkey to this big mosque in Edirne, and you can't avoid, when you're out of Israel and the war and the fear that we grew up in, and we did not learn any Islam because that was the enemy, and we were so afraid, and there were wars again and again and again, and there is a conflict that is not solved, and I'm afraid will not be solved until the map will be set, and we are still fighting for land. Nobody decides, difficult to decide where the border is. I was this morning at the Museum of African American History, and I saw, it's tough, I won't go there. No, but when a nation is still trying to build itself and build its place, everything, it's still a sense of war. And I deeply appreciate what you said, Mohammad, but there is still a war against the state of Israel, and so it's very difficult to do this. But what I want to say about this third sin that we committed, that we need to recognize it and we need to fix it, and I think there is an opportunity and a possibility of very beautiful, a very deep and beautiful life together between Jews and Arabs of all kinds, Bedouins and Druze and Palestinians. And I think the word kibush, the occupation, is in the center of Rehov Kaplan, at least where I go to the demonstrations. Whereas in the beginning it was trying to put aside, and then the Palestinian flag and the word occupation became everybody's problem. It's not something that you can not recognize and think, how can we solve it? It's not so easy, as I learned in the Knesset. Even if you want to solve it, it's not the next day that you can solve it, because all three solutions are challenging. I will stop now. I just want to see if I forgot something important. Just to say as an ending before we start the discussion that it is a great crisis, but it is a great opportunity, and that I think that your voice from far away is crucial and important and is heard. And whenever people are talking from here, it is translated and people know about it. And when there's demonstrations, when Israeli leaders come, it makes a big effect. I know as a politician how effective it is when there is a demonstration, especially on your name. And thank you for caring about us.
Thank you. So you've heard now from our three speakers who gave us a lot of food for thought, and we're going to open it up in a minute to questions. We encourage our students to line up here, and I apologize in advance. We will only have a few minutes to do this, so I will ask our speakers if we can keep our responses short, brief, so we can get to as many questions as we can before we excuse me, before we adjourn. And I'll just take the prerogative as the moderator to ask the first question, which is maybe a provocative question. Former IDF Chief of Staff Gadi Eisenkot, former Mossad Chief Tamir Pardo, and others in the security establishment have made the point that Israel's internal threats are greater than Israel's external threats, despite all the enemies everybody knows about. And more recently, President Isaac Herzog said that he fears a civil war. And so I turn to you and ask, is a civil war an actual possibility in your opinion? And anyone can respond to this.
Actually, there is a civil war since 1948 against Arab citizens. And it didn't end. And I think that national religious movement in Israel is escalating it right now to a level that has not been conceived. They talk about second Nakba that they want to impose on Arab citizens and Palestinians. Ruth, you said that, quoting you, there is still a war against the state of Israel. I don't see the war against the state of Israel. I see the war Israel is still continuing against the Palestinians. The Palestinians did accept Israel and accept the existence of Israel. The Arab world has accepted Israel. And now the Saudis are saying, we accept Israel, but finish your war on the Palestinians. The creeping annexation, which is not creeping anymore, it's fast annexation of the West Bank, is the war. What are the Palestinians doing? They say they're defending their last hold of the land. They're not declaring war. Is the Palestinian Authority declaring war against Israel? They're not. There's no war against Israel in my view anymore. And I think the war is still is led now by the national religious, I don't know if to call it theology or national ideology that they created, that they want to go beyond the 181 UN solution, the 242 UN resolution, and say we want more. They're not, I mean, despite the fact that Israel, they officially recognize Israel is way bigger than the 242 land that was allocated for the state of Israel, the Palestinians are saying we're ready to accept barely 20% of the land of Palestine, historic Palestine, to be a future Palestinian state. Now, so from that perspective, I think, yes, there is still a civil war. The Arab citizens are not staging that war, but there is a war against Arab citizens happening every day. It is by taking over land. It is discrimination. When you institutionalize discrimination against me, my children, and my 2-month-old granddaughter, from my perspective, discrimination, institutional, deliberate discrimination is war declaration. When people try to steal the rights of other citizens, it's declaring war on them. Smotrich, the Minister of Education, who wants separation, unequal separation, and steals the budget that is allocated to Arab citizens, it's calling war on Arab citizens. So that's one aspect of it. Now, when it comes to changing the definition of the state from a nation state, and I have no problem with Israel being a nation state of the Jewish people. But if you want to be a nation state of the Jewish people, you need to also assume responsibility, which is allocating national minority status to the non-Jews. You cannot say only Jews can claim collective rights. Also, non-Jews have collective rights. Now, we need to balance those rights. So I will not declare independence of the Arab citizens inside the state of Israel. I will not have an alternative flag. But other nations that have nation states have also made amendments of whether it is the language issue, the official language issue, maybe representation in parliament, but not only parliament, but guaranteed representation in government, in decision making, so that representation is not at the legislative level, but also at the executive level. And I think that the civil war that many are talking about is those that are trying to steal Israel from the way it was described in the Declaration of Independence into a new Israel that was described maybe 3,000 years old, which is a more biblical approach, where they see the minority, the Arab minority, as not as citizens, but probably as, they use the term ger, as strangers that live in society. With all due respect to Judaism, I'm not a stranger. My family has lived in the same town for 800 years. I'm not a stranger.
Thank you, Mohammad. So we have, if you can respond very, very briefly, just to give a chance to some of our students to ask a question or two, that would be great. Thank you.
Yes, I don't know how to offer this. Well, very briefly. Gadi Eisenhower was positing external versus internal threats. So I'll speak just to that. If you look at the history of China, China was conquered by some foreign dynasties, foreign regimes, several times, and always were able to remake itself. But it always went into collapse, when the society disintegrated and the military disintegrated. That happened at least 20 times, if not more. Is the Israeli military disintegrating? No. But is it on danger of disintegrating? Absolutely. As a result of the rapid pace of events right now. More importantly, we clearly see attempts to create differentiated militias. In fact, there are militias already in the West Bank. They basically are settler militias, with some sort of a formal or official status. So that's one danger. The bigger danger is, of course, if the society disintegrates. And I think I spent 12 minutes talking about, the idea of solidarity, so I'll stop here. Definitely, he's right, yeah.
I'll go on from here. Mohammad, I think that
Your mic is off. Maybe use yours.
maybe mine will work.
We can hear you.
You can hear me?
Only mine works.
But until it gets to me, I'll be brief. I wanted to say, Mohammad, between you and me, we can make peace before we go back home. I wish we could. And I think you're right in everything you say. But I want to say to your question, Guy, there is a cultural war going on today, something that never happened before. I think today mothers and parents like me will not let their kids go to the army the same way that we did before, because we lost trust in the people that are giving the orders. And to lose trust in a country is a terrible loss. And the pilots that volunteer, the older ones that are not in the army anymore, but they volunteer and they do most of the work, they say, we have such power to throw bombs and we won't do it if we don't trust the people that are giving the orders. That's a terrible move. That's one thing. The other thing that's happening that I don't think has happened before is that a lot of people are leaving. And it happened a few times before, and some of you know people that left, but not in the way that colonies of Israelis are afraid and are leaving. You're right, Mohammed, that there is some kind of nostalgia. Like, let's go back to the Israel that was. I'm not nostalgic. I don't think it was so good for everyone, and we need to see all the citizens that we have and give complete rights. But there is, if you come to visit Israel now, it is not just another, something big is happening. It's a cultural war in the depth, and it is a frightening economic and army, and it is very, very upsetting. We live with like a very dark cloud on us when we wake up, and it's quite nice to come to visit here for a while, I must say.
Thank you. So one of our star students is up here tomorrow. We'll ask your great question, what I'm sure will be a great question.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to be a star student after this, but I'm joking. So hi, everyone. Can I take this off? I'm Tamara Listenberg. I'm actually from Israel, from Tel Aviv, and I study here at American University. I'm also the club president of Students Supporting Israel here on campus. And I have a few comments before I ask my question to Professor Tzvi that would be directed to you. But I think one of the most important things that the Center for Israel Studies and AU teaches us is to be open-minded and to listen to different views, and that's what education is all about. I'm afraid that for the start of this panel, I don't feel like that is being fairly represented, and I think you all have great opinions, and that is your truth. But I think you're making the other side feel like complete lunatics, extremists. Not everyone who thinks differently is an extremist. So I think that is an important fact to say. I think not all Haredi are the way that you guys brought them up. There are many Haredi in the Israeli society that get up and work and do all these things apart from also serving as their rabbis and things like that. And I think it's just important to bring up because not everyone here knows it. Not everyone here grew up in Israel. And people are coming to hear this. And I agree that our nation is torn. I agree that we might not have solidarity. But I don't know how, of course, the problems we must bring up, but I'm not sure how that will pertain and it will support building that bridge that we really, really need. I don't think our flag belongs, and I think we cannot say it. I don't think it belongs to the right or the left or the center. It belongs to all of us. It belongs to all Jews, not just Israelis. And I think that is a huge point that we're all mistaken. And the huge point that these rallies are also trying to bring, we're taking the flag back to the left. No, I have to say that I disagree with that, and I have to bring that point up. Sorry for my spiel, but Israelis, we can't shut up. And to my quick question, hopefully. Professor, it's me. So you discussed about the Arabic language, right? Yes. And you said how the Supreme Court, to a Mizrahi Jew, and I also remember your talk from a few months ago, how you've been dealing with a lot of problems with the Supreme Courts when it comes to Mizrahi Jews. So how are you, as a representative, as someone who tried to bring it back and they shut you down while you are trying to bring that solidarity back, like how do you disagree with some sort of judicial reform?
Yeah, I can answer it very, very quickly. The fact that the Supreme Court doesn't represent the Israeli society and doesn't listen to all segments of Israeli society is a reality. The fact that, the coalition right now uses it is basically a lie, period. The government, the current government, the Likud has been in power since 1977, used the Mizrahi cause forever, yes, never did anything. If you look at the numbers of Sephardic judges before 1948, you see more under mandatory Palestine, under the British government. You have more Sephardic judges and doctors there. Now you have one. What happened? This is a dynamic. Okay. However, I just spoke about the fact that, you need to go outside your environment and, outgrow it, And I refuse to have, the predicament of, or the plight of Mizrahi Jews in Israel after 48 as an excuse by the people who propagate the judicial reform or the judicial coup, because the direction where they are leading us is very, very clear. They're not going to change. They're not going to make the Supreme Court more diverse. Absolutely not. Okay, so do I support a complete structural change in Israeli society that will give more room for weakened populations? Absolutely. Do I think that this is the road to do it? Absolutely not.
I'd like to just add, where are you? Hi. Thank you for your comments. I did not at all mean that the flag now belongs to the center, to the left, but that it belongs to everyone, and that we need to reclaim all symbols, like we need to reclaim the classic text, the Talmud and the Tanakh, and it belongs to every Jew in the world. That's one. Second thing I want to say to you about the Haredis, and I have, of course, a weak spot for them, and there's something like all of us feel it's like our grandparents. But there is the politics of Haredis today that take billions of our tax money. Most of them do not pay taxes, and I'm talking facts, not feelings. And even if I am for a minority of scholars, I wish there will be women and men and all kinds of Jews, but scholars that will be supported by the community like they always have been. But the numbers that are called scholars today are completely, many of them, most of them are not scholars. And what they write in their papers, in Yated Ne'eman of last month, talking about Israel as a state like any other state that they have nothing to personally to do with, and they talk in such hatred and alienation that brings us to feel far away from them, to feel alienated from them. It's not something that is left or right. It's just a matter of fact of what happened with our beautiful culture of Torah study. There's something sick there and needs to be cut down to normal proportions and open to you and me and every other Jew that wants to study and be supported.
Thank you. Does everybody hear me? Does this work? The point of the opening conference was to identify the gaps in Israeli society, and I think clearly that has been done among the panelists and the audience. I want to encourage all of you to show up tomorrow, because tomorrow's panels are going to explore bridge building strategies to address the many gaps that were explored here. And I want to thank, first of all three of our panelists, who I think did an excellent job representing different perspectives that are very legitimate. I also want to thank, I know everybody's thanked Professor Michael Brenner and Laura Cutler for the excellent job in organizing this conference, as well as my colleagues Dan Arbel and Lauren Strauss and Eran Carmel and others who are here on behalf of the Center for Israel Studies, and of course our board and those of you who decided to show up because you're interested. And we appreciate it, and thank you so much for showing up, and we hope to see you tomorrow.